Hey guys, I'm Clampity as you may know, so this video was originally going to be a second channel video since I thought the topic would be a little niche, but I wanted to put at least some effort into making something for my main channel after suffering a 2-year period of creative burnout, at least when it comes to making YouTube videos. So what better way to do that than make a video on something I like? Now, I don't know about you, but I love lore. Media with unique world building and backstories have my heart. Dandy's World is no different, even though one of the major criticisms of the game's story is that there's just not much of it. But I want to use this video to prove y'all otherwise, and that there actually is a lot to get out of this game. Now, I want to try and make this video enjoyable for people both familiar and unfamiliar with the game, which, if I'm being honest, I'm not quite confident I can do. Still though, I'm going to give some context on the game itself before I head into the meat of the video. So, Dandy's World is a game on the rather infamous platform Roblox, which, if you don't know what Roblox is, this is probably your first time on the internet. I'd argue that this game is too good for the platform, but for now that's neither here nor there. It was released in 2024, although the developers Blush Crunch Studio have made one game a few years before Dandy's World called Flavor Frenzy. If you like cute tower defenses, I'd totally recommend it since that game's also pretty well done. The head of the studio and basically the creative developer goes by Quelver or Quell online. The elephant in the room, however, is that Blush Crunch used to have another lead developer whose username I won't say here since I don't want to bring any, publicity to them. They were not only another developer, but were a friend of Quell's. However, they were fired in October 2024 after being in a pretty bad controversy. This information is important because it's clear that the game was struggling for a bit, and you could see that both reflected in the gameplay and the lore we had at the time. This game's Halloween event had to be completely rewritten and delayed a whole year. Dandy's World is doing a lot better now, though, with Quell having a great new team and a whole bunch of collabs and merch and other fun stuff. Like, when I say this game is too good for Roblox, I mean it. The hype is very much well-deserved. And the reason I think it's so well loved is because it takes the mascot horror genre and gives it a very human feel. Yes, there's humans in the lore, but none that appear in the actual game. Like, these bright-colored, happy-looking characters are the game's humans. Yes, they're also the monsters, with the evil version of them known as Twisteds literally being the main danger of the game. The game itself isn't really a typical mascot horror, rather an endless survival game where the goal is to get as far as you can into this abandoned children's play place without dying. If you're not playing solo, you're relying heavily on working well with your teammates in the round, so with the style of game that Dandy's World is, it can be tough to world build since you're not really playing a story game. But the world building is very much there. It's there for people who like lore and want to go searching for it, and from my understanding of it, the story works pretty well with how the gameplay is actually. So, on the surface, you can see that this game takes place in Gardenview, an abandoned educational center and museum, as they call it. The sign is right there in the lobby when you first join the game. Gardenview is likely somewhere in the United States due to them using the month-day-year calendar format. You and all the players in the server spawn in the lobby of Gardenview with elevators that lead you to actually play the game and venture into the mysterious abandoned parts of the facility, and you play as these characters called Toons. Toons tend to be anthropomorphic objects or animals, and usually have some sort of gimmick to them, such as Astro, the sleepy moon who walks through dreams, V, the TV robot who hosts a game show, Pebble, the pet rock who behaves like a dog, Bobette, the Christmas ornament, who's basically their version of Santa. You get the idea. The reason the characters were all created like this is because the word toon actually refers to the fact that they're also cartoon characters and were all part of a children's TV show also called Dandy's World. We know this because during gameplay, the Toons have dialogue that mention them being characters in a show, as well as the fact that if you walk around in one of the various floors of Gardenview, you can see storyboards of scenes in the show and screens with animated segments featuring the Toons. With that, we know that this is a cartoon and it wasn't like the Toons were actors, although if I'm not mistaken, it is unclear whether the living, breathing Toons were created first or the show. But where exactly did Gardenview and the Dandy's World show come from, and where am I even getting this information? Well, in-game exploring Gardenview, there are a lot of little bits and pieces that tell us about the lore. I don't want to have to cite my source every single time, so I'm going to do my best to make sure everything I say here was confirmed somewhere in the game, and I'll clarify if I say something that's just my own speculation. Also, all the images shown here are taken from the unofficial Dandy's World wiki on fandom, which is just a convenient place to get Dandy's World related info. With that out of the way, I could say that the introduction segment of this video is done, and now I can finally get into the actual content of this game's story. I'm gonna call this first section Gardenview's Uprising. So, the farthest back we see the Dandy's World timeline go is October 4th, 1984, with this loan application signed by two individuals, Arthur Walton and Delilah Keane. These humans would go on to be the founders of the company Gardenview Entertainment, which would then create the Educational Center as well as the Dandy's World show, both happening in 1987. I mean, haven't they learned anything from Fazbear Entertainment? Guess not. Arthur was the main creative of the duo, having made the TV show and its characters. Delilah seems to have been his more technical business partner who helped bring the location and tunes to life. The timeline here does get kind of murky, but all you need to know is that the actual creation of this children's entertainment all happened in the year 1987. The first tune to be created was, of course, Designation L001. Now, what does that mean? Well, the number means he's the first, and frankly, only tune of his category, which makes sense since the L likely stands for lead character. This lead character is, of course, Dandicus Dancifer, better known as Dandy. See, the idea of Gardenview was that kids would have a fun and educational experience there, while also being able to meet real-life characters from their favorite cartoon with this technology of tunes able to be brought to life. In the creation of Dandy, though, they had a little bit of a rocky start with him. He had some breathing issues which they were able to fix, but one problem couldn't be solved as easily. This happy-go-lucky rainbow flower was feeling lonely. I mean, in the show he had friends and a bunch of other tunes, but in real life he just had his human parents/creators. So naturally, Delilah made more tunes, starting out with M001 as soon as she heard Dandy felt lonely. M stands for main character, important but not as much as lead, and 1 stands for the first main character created, obviously. This character was none other than Dandy's pet rock, Pebble Dancifer Jr. Personal bias incoming, but I love Pebble. He's one of my favorites. Just look at the little guy. I cannot for the life of me get good at his playstyle in game, though. But soon, more main characters were created to accompany Dandy and be there for the children, and they also formed bonds with each other, which is sweet. These tunes are, in order of designation, Astronovalite the Crescent Moon, Sprout Seedly the Strawberry, Shelly Facilian the Fossil, and V version 1 the TV. Yeah, you're gonna notice how only the lead and main characters have last names. There were also dozens of side characters created and brought to life after them, but I guess it's only the nature of the show that Arthur wanted to focus on the main characters, with them almost always being the central focus of episodes and being featured the most around Gardenview, like on cardboard cutouts and posters. The only other tune who has a last name is Dial Timesley, and he's the only tune who didn't even appear on the show. He was just created to work at Gardenview and operate the train. The main characters were also the only tunes with handlers hired to specifically be their caretakers, with the exception of this guy, Devin Reed, in the middle, seeming to be the handler of both Dandy and Pebble. Or maybe it's just Dandy who takes care of their pet. It's kind of unclear. There is actually a few examples of these side characters coming out a little iffy when brought to life, such as Blot the Ink Blob not being able to talk at all in the show, but talking backwards in Gardenview, the holiday-exclusive tunes not really knowing what to do with themselves when it isn't their season, and Squirm the Bookworm feeling as if his personal identity as a caterpillar doesn't fit who he is on the show as a bookworm, even though he does eat books, but only really out of stress. The main characters have had their problems as well, like with V being dissatisfied about planning on being upgraded to V version 2, but either her handler Veronica Hurley was able to stop that, or, since that discussion took place in 2002, Gardenview would have closed down soon after that. But still, with the main characters having their own handlers and more positive attention being put on them, they were likely listened to and their needs were prioritized, even if Gardenview Entertainment did kind of have questionable business practices with everyone. This seems like a good point in the video to introduce a special class of tune and how they have had their own unique issues with the Dandy's World official music. The holiday main characters are such an interesting case because despite being main characters, they didn't have handlers and weren't really bought into the public except during their designated times of year. Still, we do know a lot about them, so I've chosen to dedicate a whole section to them since it really shows how carelessly Delilah was thinking while bringing Arthur's creations to life. The holiday tunes were likely introduced to the public from 1990 to 1991, since that's when their special episodes aired as seen on their posters. Dandy's World currently has 3 official songs out, all of which center the holiday main characters and how flawed they were made, likely due to Delilah's oversight with her barely viewing the tunes as autonomous beings, but I mean, that's what happens when you create these living cartoons with human-level intelligence. It's like AI, but the intelligence isn't even artificial, even with a literal robot in the cast who explicitly states she's more than her code. The first holiday main character to be released both in the fictional timeline and real game updates is Babette Carolyn, this red bauble who was made for Christmas. Like I said before, the role of Babette is to be like Santa Claus and make gifts for all the other tunes as well as the children who come and visit Gardenview. Arthur and Delilah were proud of her success and kept asking her to make more and more presents all by herself, since the other Christmas tunes, Rudy, Ginger, and Cole, weren't created with gift-making in mind, only Babette. Rudy's an overly festive reindeer who thinks every day is Christmas. Ginger the cookie is the shy cousin of side character Cosmo the pastry who likes to learn and bake with him, and Cole is Babette's pet rock who, unlike Pebble, is big and grumpy rather than small and energetic. Babette, being the only tune who really prepares for Christmas, and as shown in official song The Perfect Christmas, burns herself out and suffers a great fall from a ladder trying to decorate a tree. What happens to her after that? More on that later. Some months later, we are introduced to Bassie Bloomington, a sweet and shy little flower basket who represents the season of Easter. Arthur wrote her to be a main character, but to also be flawed in that she's anxious and reliant on social connection with other tunes, which in my opinion is completely good intentions from Arthur. He made a very human, basket character some shy kids could relate to, while also having an important role as Gardenview's face of springtime. After Bassie's creation, though, Delilah had written a note to Arthur, saying how she thinks Bassie shouldn't be the Easter main character, and it's implied that somebody should be her replacement instead. Now, of Bassie's 3 other Easter friends, let's take a look at who we think might be Delilah's ideal replacement. There's Eggson the Egg, an old man with a lot of wisdom and stories from Easter's past. There's Flight the Butterfly, who likes scrapbooking and is the overprotective older brother of year-round tune Flutter. And there's Coco the Chocolate Bunny, a bright and cheerful tune who radiates positivity and loves helping others and being a good selfless role model, as well as being a super cute little Easter bunny. I wonder who it could be. It's Coco. As told by the music video for Bassie's official song Wilting, she finds the note from Delilah and can pretty obviously see how well Coco's doing, and begins to get down on herself, as well as showing extreme jealousy and self-comparison to Coco as seen by the song's lines, "Be the tune Easter needs, be just like you," and later the more desperate, "I'm nothing like you." This poor girl gets super mischaracterized by the fanbase as hating Coco, though less so since the song's release. Bassie doesn't hate her and actually makes an effort to get along with her, which works for a little while, until she sees that Coco is a fan favorite and even gets her own line of merchandise as a main character would. Bassie doesn't actually want to hurt her girlfriend, her friend, but this increasing resentment and despair keeps growing inside of her, which doesn't end well for her. When you get an idea of a character with certain traits on paper and put them out into the real world as a being with thoughts, those traits naturally will manifest themselves into the context of their real-world situation, such as coding a young child to have a family but said family not actually existing, which causes some stressful memory gaps. This is the case with Gordy Holloway, the Halloween main character of Dandy's World. This little pumpkin is one of the only 2 canonical children on the show, the other being year-round tune Toodles the 8-Ball. Naturally, Gordy and Toodles get along pretty well and like to play pretend, but one major difference between them is that, though neither of them have physical tune parents, Gordy was written to have them in the show, but since he's mostly spending time with the other Halloween tunes, they don't really have designs, and Delilah didn't make them in real life. You could argue Toodles technically has a sort of parent, with her non-related father figure being this guy Roger, which honestly makes Gordy's situation even worse. His young mind does have good role models as he looks up to the other main characters. His fellow Halloween tunes, Rebecca the Skeleton, Sylvester the Ghostly Knight, and Eclipse the Werewolf, all do their best to take care of and be nice to him. So he does have a lot of adults who are with him and have his best interest in mind. But it's because his biological parents were written to exist in the show that he feels as if they somehow exist, even though he can't remember what they look like. It makes him really distressed, and that's the whole point of his song Locked Away, which, unlike the other two songs, just feels like a regular CG5 song rather than something sung by the characters themselves. I like CG5, the song's good though, I think he did a good job, and it does get his feelings across with how he should be having this perfect life as a kid with a whole lot of friends and caretakers, but something feels wrong. He can't remember his parents' faces. He knows they're supposed to exist, but they don't. And this gets him really troubled, since he basically knows he's only built as a source of entertainment instead of his own person with his own needs, which, as you can imagine, doesn't end well for him either. Now, with these three tunes, what exactly happens to them after they reach their breaking point? Well, remember how earlier in the video I mentioned Twisteds, those evil doppelgangers covered in black ichor who try to attack you as a player? Well, this is where I talk about one of the major flaws in designing the real-life versions of the tunes: becoming twisted. Now, the tunes present day are aware that Twisteds exist. They've got to run from them all the time. And because of how they look, you'd think they know that they're past versions of themselves who, malfunctioned and became evil or something. Well, let's use Babette as an example. Even though her breaking point was her suffering a head trauma that shattered her as an ornament, it was the feeling of burnout and failure that turned her twisted, even if it was a physical event that pushed her over the edge. Literally. I'm sorry. What causes a tune to turn twisted is something mental rather than physical, with overcome by ichor being what finally turns them twisted. Ichor is quite mysterious, as it's the main currency of the game and is also what tunes have to extract from the various machines, as they call it, around Gardenview in order to progress the game. In Greek mythology, ichor is what flows through the deities like blood, though it's unclear if that's also the case for tunes. But they do have to be exposed to it and be in some kind of vulnerable state in order for the ichor to turn them twisted. It could be a possibility that it's similar to their blood due to the fact that when you die in-game, your tune explodes in a burst of ichor, but I think that's unlikely due to Dandy's World being a game for all ages, and having Twisteds be all leaking, blood is kinda violent. Then again, it's a possibility, we don't really know. Twisteds have most likely lost their consciousness, or at least the ability to think logically, but they are still capable of feeling emotions due to some of them being sad or angry or even happy. I'd say for the most part, they're stuck as the emotion that they were when they first became twisted. One could even argue that for seemingly happy Twisteds like Shelly, they were pushed into a sort of apathy turned happiness to be a monster and attack other tunes. This part is my speculation. A lot of people think sad or angry Twisteds still have consciousness, while happy ones have completely lost it, but that's actually a popular fan theory and isn't confirmed to be canon. The emotions of the Twisteds probably do have some significance, but maybe I'm just reading too far into who looks happy and who doesn't. The point is, ichor is dangerous, and Gardenview is full of this mysterious substance. You'd imagine this doesn't make Gardenview exactly built to last long term, and you'd be right. 15 years after its opening in 1987, it hit the news that Gardenview was shutting down on June 29, 2002, due to a malfunction incident. This incident is likely an experience with Twisteds, namely Twisted Dandy. This note from Arthur talks about something happening to him, and I think that this is Dandy becoming twisted. In the game, Dandy runs a shop both in the lobby and the elevator, and when you don't buy from him 3 or more times in a row in the elevator, you'll have the chance to see Twisted Dandy spawn on the next floor down. After you see him, Dandy will acknowledge that he did become twisted the next time his shop appears. It's unknown if other tunes can go from twisted back to normal, but I mean, Dandy can. I guess Dial can as well. More on him in just a bit. But seeing Dandy like this is not good for kids at all, I'd imagine. In-game, he's classified as lethal, meaning he one-shot kills you no matter your health if he hits you. Even if he looks like a giant kitty cat, I think Twisted Dandy should not be around children, but I don't know, that's just me. The 2 current lethal class Twisteds are Dandy, star of the show, and Dial, who operates the only way to get to Gardenview. Twisted Dial kind of looks like a snake, and Dial does say that when you talk to him in the lobby, that everything is better on a train except snakes. So, is he aware that sometimes he becomes twisted, or is this a throwaway line saying he doesn't like snakes? I have no idea. But 2 tunes with pretty important roles end up becoming the most deadly, at least if they actually reach you. Twisted Dandy's kinda weak in-game, but I digress. Tunes becoming twisted is absolutely an example of a malfunction. But as we see in the game, every tune can and has become a twisted. But a lot of questions still remain about what the whole deal with Gardenview is in the present day. Why are there toons and twisted versions of themselves at the same time and place? Are there multiple of the same toon existing? Do they just get replaced with normal toons after turning twisted? Well, this is actually where the lore gets a little bit messy, and I think it'll be revealed more with time. But one thing we do know is that during the time the actual game takes place, so does a little something called the Ichor Operation. So for this section, not that much is actually known really, although I do think that Quell does have some sort of way to fill in these lore gaps that she's waiting to release at the right time. Let's start with looking at Dandy, since, well, he's the star of the show and is the main guy who keeps Gardenview running even after it's been shut down to the public. Dandy, as stated by the game, runs the Ichor Operation, and it's all his fault. Now, we can try to find out what this means by relating it to the context the toons are in when we're playing the game. So, the whole thing about Dandy's world is that you play as a toon. You know this already. You and a team of up to 7 more teammates take a downwards elevator through Gardenview, and the way you progress through each floor is extracting Ichor from machines. Dandy is also there, even when not a twisted, since every other floor he presents you with his item shop. Interestingly enough, the currency for Dandy's shop is tapes. Tapes that Dandy gets really defensive over if you don't buy from him in a while, which then causes him to turn twisted. It's only logical that these tapes scattered throughout the floors of Gardenview are old videotapes of the Dandy's World show. Dandy will do anything to preserve the show even after it's ended and keep its memory running for as long as possible. And since Ichor is quite important in the creation of toons and just this strange technology in general, in order to keep this kind of Dandy-run society alive, someone's got to go out there and fetch this resource that this entire facility runs on. Even if it puts toons in danger with events like blackouts and Ichor leaks and hello, twisteds. Dandy stops at nothing to keep the show and the golden days of Gardenview as alive as they can be. This Ichor could be what brings toons back to life after becoming twisted, keeps the train running so Dial can get goods from outside. Who knows what else that little mastermind is doing with this operation that is literally the whole game. They're in a dangerous abandoned facility while also doing tasks instilled in them by their leader who, since no humans are here anymore, it's Dandy. Dial too, I guess, but if anything, he's just an employee of Dandy's who does whatever he tells him to do. And I mean, it's not like toons die if they're not in Gardenview. Dial takes the train outside of Gardenview all the time and somehow makes money to get all these supplies, or maybe he steals. A lot of it is up in the air, but when it comes down to it, the toons aren't really in the greatest situation despite the happy faces they may put on. Even Dandy. Yes, him keeping the toons here to partake in this nasty and dangerous operation essentially forever is probably out of a selfish desire, but he isn't evil. He's just perpetuating all the suffering because in his mind it's the right thing to do. Lots of toons have shown their growing disdain for him, such as Goob, who's known for being a hugger, noticeably hugging Dandy less than everyone else, or Tegan, who has him on the list of toons banned from her tea parties. He's drifted apart from the rest of the main character cast except Astro, his absolute best friend, and Pebble, who's his pet. These two toons actually do have a dialogue that can happen between them, and they're both worried about him. Dandy has changed from this happy guy who's everyone's friend to this manipulative master of this dungeon he has the toons trapped in. In a way, it makes sense, since even if he's not 100% morally right, it does make sense. Since he feels a really strong connection to the show and the educational center since he's L001, the lead character. He felt loved and valued during his days on the show, even if the business that brought all of it to life was quite sketchy. It's just obsessed with old clips of the show, and with Gardenview, the place, that he's not really willing to let it go, even if it's not good for him or the rest of the toons. Well, it's not good for them either way. None of them really asked to be born or creative, but Delilah's way of bringing Arthur's creations to life is inherently flawed. We saw with examples like Squirm, V, Babette, Gordy, and Bassie that, yes, they were cartoon characters, but were made real with their own thoughts and barely any room to grow into their own people due to how they were created as characters, not people. It really just isn't ideal to create a life form after characters from a kid's show with its own cartoon logic and animators able to make their endings happy no matter what. And it's honestly really psychological, and that's why I love what we have of the lore so far. There's really no way for these toons to be happy and live normal lives due to the fact that their existence is unethical on multiple fronts and isn't their fault. Nor is it Arthur's, the man who came up with the idea for the characters. He partnered up with Delilah, unaware of what it really means to be using this Ichor technology. Now, in a perfect world, the Toons would be out of garden view, but where would they go? I really don't know, because they can't exactly become pets, since they're like little cartoon people, or integrate themselves into human society, since though they have equal intelligence and capabilities, they're talking objects and animals. People wouldn't really be accepting of that. Maybe they could reconnect with Arthur or one of the Toon handlers to take care of them, but that's also a lot of responsibility for one or a few people to ensure the well-being of dozens of Toons forever. We also don't really know if they're immortal or not. They most likely wouldn't be, since I think they can only come back to life due to some kind of ichor thing within Garden View, but we don't really know. On top of that, Dandy would have to go through some heavy character development having to do with acceptance that something isn't what it used to be. You know, in a world where the ichor operation ends and everyone escapes, all of them need therapy. And it would be really, really difficult for them to adjust to a style of life they weren't quite literally built for. They'd still have the minds of cartoon characters, and their insecurities could lead to Twisteds wandering outside of Garden View with no real way to turn them back. But who knows? We don't really know what it would mean for a Toon to live outside of Garden View, since that's where they all are and have been since their creation. So, in a way, it's just that Delilah went about this whole business in a terrible way, and that there really is no happy ending for the Toons. They're all victims, including Dandy, and they're just stuck in Garden View, which, if you think about it way too deeply like I did, is actually pretty sad lore for a Roblox game. But even if their lives are kind of miserable working and extracting ichor, they get by. They still have time for hobbies and are able to connect with each other if you pay attention to the little dialogues they have with each other and with the shopkeeper gossip feature. On screen are some of my personal favorites, and this just makes me happy. You can pause to read them since it's just adorable. It's cute fluff amidst Garden View's darker underbelly, which is a big reason why I love Dandy's World. And the game's still in alpha, so who knows how much more lore we have yet to discover. I am very, very excited whenever a new update comes around, even if that means that this video will probably be inaccurate sooner or later. I just wanted to work on a video essay about something I like and not worry about views or perception by others or anything. So I'm pretty satisfied with what I did. Who knows when I'll post a video again or release more music. I just want to give myself time to heal from this burnout, and this little passion project of mine is a start. If you like this, consider subscribing to keep yourself posted on anything I decide to make here. Well, that's all I have to say for now. Bye-bye.